I think what struck the jury was there's been lots of projects we've looked at, and they turn into different categories. Some is about the tactics of how to use colour, and the second one is about the selection of colour. I think all of us are unanimous that the selection of colours in this building is of a very high level, and the concept behind it is that it's within the middle of the historic centre of Oxford. There are buildings that have quite subtle browns and yellows to do with the brickwork and staying around it. And what the building is meant to do is almost comedian-like blend in to those surroundings. But although that tactic we've seen before, I think the selection of colours just is very beautiful and very striking. And I think the skill in that selection, I think, is really what made it stand out from the crowd.
I think it's so difficult to work with such subtlety of colour from the planning stage, but actually for it to come to when it comes to life in the building, that's so tricky to get right to me. And it's just such a beautiful level of colour. It really moves me. Really, it's beautiful. That's why it's beautiful.
For me, this is I think this is perhaps the more challenging of all of them. A challenging convention because it is in an established Georgian quarter of the city, and it uses an aggressively modern language, but it's a very consistent language, which I think was something that pulled out for me. And the idea that the envelope of the building is actually three-dimensional and goes inside, so what you see outside becomes the interior of the space. So I think that is perhaps unique to within the shortlist at least, that the cladding actually becomes the interior of the building as well. And I think the use of colour here, about moving through the landscape and the greens that reflects through to the kind of Georgian brickwork on the other elevation where it's kind of more pinks and so on and so forth is quite nice, but it's done in an abstract way, not in a kind of slavish tonal way.
One of the things I think about just judging this prize full stop is because I think you've had 5 years, the project can go back 5 years, because the first time I can recall there being a prize for colour in architecture. But some of the projects look, if you like, potential, they've been here a long time now, and I think the DRMM one, it's hard for people to remember. It's very, very striking where it was designed a long time ago, and while now there's lots of buildings that look like that, at the time there were very few. So I think, again, it was very, very sophisticated the way it's developed. I've been lucky enough to look around the building. I think the building by Manuel Gautran is incredibly striking. The choice of bright yellow in such a dominant building in the city is a very brave choice, but it works, and it's hard to imagine it in any other colour. So I think that's what's been interesting today. We've seen some buildings where there's been a selection of lots of colours, and then just a few projects where there's just been one colour, and it just shows that if one was to imagine the building being white or something more neutral, and then you imagine the brave colour choices, it just shows what colour can do for architecture, I think.